the handout, and the links on the handout are hot. That means you don't have to type all this in. If you just download it, it's a PDF file, click the button, and it'll take you to the source that you want to go to. Okay. So the objectives this morning is the founders' concern about political parties. I mean, were they in favor of political parties? No, but they had some concerns. And the evolution of political parties in America. And then we're going to talk about how the Kansas-Nebraska bill and the Dred Scott decision impacted and created a political party. We're going to talk about political parties in Oregon. How many are there? Where are they at? What is a voting precinct? How political parties in Oregon are organized. And one of the odd things is that there's an ORS, an Oregon Revised Statute, that tells us how to organize. I always thought that was odd. And then the role of the precinct committee person. And the state takes the last two words and makes one word out of it. They have committee person as a word. It's not a word, but that's, state statute has it that way. So one of the concerns about the founders is they were fearful of what they called the rise of factions. They believed that factions would be created and people would get organized in order to advance a political agenda. I mean, they thought about that in the 1700s, and we see that today. James Madison, in Federalist number 10, wrote an article, Federalist 10, called Mischiefs of Factions. And it's a humorous read, and if you don't have a copy of the Federalist Papers, they look like this, okay? And they're available online, or you can do what I did, which was crazy, is buy a copy, okay? One of their fears, I'm sorry?
It went away.
Which part went away?
The screen went away. I couldn't follow what you were saying on there.
Is it up there now?
Yes.
Okay. If I move, it goes away. No. It's not because I'm standing here, okay? So one of their concerns, and Madison wrote about this, is a large majority could seize control of the government. So they wanted to put together checks and balances, and a couple of those they did is the House of Representatives is by popular vote is the House of the people, and then the Senate was not by popular vote initially. The Senate represented the states and were selected by the state legislatures. And the real value that had is if you sent senators off and they didn't represent your state, you didn't have to hold an election to get rid of them. You just called them home and sent somebody else. We'll see in a little bit how we got rid of that. So George Washington thought he was smarter than the average bear, and so he wanted to put together what he called an enlightened administration. He wanted to avoid the political parties issue. So he selected Alexander Hamilton as his Secretary of Treasury and Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. Now they had opposite views about the role of government. So Hamilton was part of what became the Federalist Party, and what he wanted to do at that time was take on the debt of each of the states for the Revolution. So the government should pay the debt that each of these colonies that are now states had put together. Well, Jefferson said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. His deal was he believed that the moneyed people, moneyed businesses, would benefit and that the states would not. So you got these opposing views here. Later on, James Monroe had this to say: surely our government may go on and prosper without the existence of parties. I've always considered their existence as the curse of the country. The mischiefs of factions, okay? This whole area is what got us out of the states identifying the senators and put them to popular vote. So remember, it was checks and balances here, and at the time, in the early 1900s, people going, well, you can buy a senator, you just got to have enough money, okay? And so they put together an issue that brought it before the voters. In 1913, it was called the 17th Amendment. And we turned the senators into popular vote. Now, somebody had the idea that now you couldn't buy a senator, but we know that that's not the case, okay? Then the other thing that happened was the use of courts to resolve political issues. That's a big deal now. It really expanded in the 70s under Nixon, but we'll see it here in a few minutes how it was alive and well in the 1800s. The piece that we often forget is my favorite amendment, the 10th Amendment. It said the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. Now, what that says is anything we told you can't do that either. Okay? For instance, voting, with the exception of the president, is relegated to the states to decide how to do that. It's not a federal issue. We have movement afoot to make that a federal issue, but it's a states' rights issue. So initially, we had these two parties, the Federalist Party and the Anti-Federalist Party. They existed from early on, but at least from 1787 up through 1796. Around 1800, we have the Federalists, and now we have the Democrat Republicans, okay? Seems like an oxymoron, but that's what they call themselves. So it's the power of the federal government versus the continued growth of the federal government not warranted by the Constitution. So you've got these opposing views. By 1820, the Federalist Party had disappeared. Then along comes Andrew Jackson, okay? The Jefferson Democrats divided into Democrats and National Republicans. This was the birth of the Democrat Party, also called the Party of Jackson. One of my curious things is, where did they get the donkey? Well, it turns out Andrew Jackson was called a jackass, but he kind of liked it and adopted the jackass Jackson as the name. Davis said he was quite comfortable with the idea, and it was not long before the donkey became established as the symbol of the Democratic Party. The image you see here was done by Thomas Nast in 1879 in Harper's Weekly. He was the one that generated the image that got used, okay? Then we have a party called the Whig Party. How many of you ever heard of the Whig Party? Okay? Oh, good, there's a few out there. I like their image here. They couldn't possibly be worse, okay? So this group was formed as opponents to Andrew Jackson. These were abolitionists. These were those who were against the harsh treatment of the natives, primarily came out of the Trail of Tears issue. These were evangelical Protestants. They became instrumental in the election of both Harrison and Taylor. Then along comes my favorite party, the Know-Nothings. This is actually was really called the Native American Party and later the American Party, but their response to any time questions were asked about where they stood on something, they would say, I know nothing, okay? Their big issue was they were opposed to immigration primarily of Irish and Germans, especially the Irish who were Roman Catholics. That was their foundation, was the opposition of immigration, okay? In 1854, there was a group met in Wisconsin. This was a group of anti-slavery people. They were individuals who believed that the government should grant also Western lands free of charge. Rather than having to pay for the 160 acres, you could just file and get it for free. So we got anti-slavery, free land, and they said a new party that will now become the Republican Party would be formed if the Kansas-Nebraska bill passed. That bill allowed states to decide whether they wanted to be slave states or not slave states. So the bill passed in May 30 of 1854, and so they had a second meeting, okay, got a group of 5 to form a party, okay. Their first meeting happened in 54 in July in Michigan, and they adopted the name Republican, and they adopted a platform and nominated candidates for office in Michigan. And lo and behold, they got a governor elected in 1859. And the issue, and the image up here is shoving slavery down the throats of the people, okay? So then along comes the Dred Scott issue. Now, I didn't know for a long time that this was a person, Dred Scott. I just thought it was an issue, okay? This guy was a slave taken from Missouri, which was a slave state, to Illinois, a free state, then to Wisconsin, a free territory at the time, and then returned to Missouri. His master died, and he sued for his freedom on the basis he had lived in a free state. Now, here's a piece of trivia for you about Missouri. If you released your slaves in Missouri, you were not responsible for them, okay? If you were in Kentucky, for instance, and you released slaves, you're responsible for them both for whatever they did, whatever mischief they got into, whatever financial problems they had, you were responsible for the life of those slaves. If you were in Virginia, you could not release your slaves at all. It was against the law. So Missouri was one of these places where people actually, I have a family that left Kentucky, moved to Missouri, and released their slaves so that they weren't responsible for them forever. So this guy said, hey, my master died. I'm going to sue and get released. And in the meantime, he had married also, so they wanted to get both of them released. The task ran on for a number of years. So he won the case in a lower court, but the Supreme Court overruled it in 1887, and many will say it's one of the worst decisions the U.S. Supreme Court has ever done. Okay? So the Republicans denounced what happened. The Democrats were split. This was a split between Democrats and Southern Democrats. Out of that, the Republicans took the House in 1858. Then in 1860, they nominated Abraham Lincoln. The platform that he ran on was not to extend slavery, wanted to get the Transcontinental Railroad in place, and wanted to support a protective tariff for businesses, okay? There were 4 men on the ballot, and Lincoln won with 39.8% of the popular vote, okay? Now, I need to own up here. I'm not intending to promote one political party over another, although I am very active in one of them, okay? And so I naturally have some biases here, and I'll try not to let those overrun me, but it's part of where my head's at, okay? So as an aside here, these two issues, okay? This one where Lincoln won because the Democrats split between Democrats and Southern Democrats, and the Dred Scott issue where the Republicans took the House, those two pieces go together, I believe, as a foundation that keeps the Democrat Party together, okay? Either you're with them or you're not part of the party. You will not find Democrats fighting amongst one another very often. There are two groups of people that I believe get in a circle and will shoot one another. One of them are Republicans, and the other one are Christians, okay? We just seem to do it to ourselves. So the Republican Party grew out of all of the splinter groups that were going on that had fractured over the year. The Whig Party, the Know Nothing Party, the Abolitionist Coalition, all of that kind of came together to form this party. So you can see that they've got feet in lots of different issues. And out of this, Thomas Nast came up with this graphic in 1874 of the elephant, okay? So that's where we get those two pieces. Then along in 1912, we get good old Teddy Roosevelt putting together the Bull Moose Party, which was actually a progressive party, okay? And it was called the Bull Moose Party as kind of an acronym here. Their platform was a restriction on campaign finances, reduction of tariffs, social insurance that we got later on, the 8-hour workday, women's suffrage, okay? Those were their progressive issues, okay? So calling the Bull Moose Party kind of overshadowed the fact that it really was a progressive party, but it dissolved in 1920. And we get the two-party system, okay? So I want to come down to Oregon now. The two major parties in Oregon, of course, the Republican Party was formed in 1859. Why 1859? What is that date significant to the state of Oregon? That's when we became a state, okay? And then the Democrat Party was also formed in 1859, okay? Now, there are other parties that are registered with the Secretary of State's office, okay? The Constitution Party, the Independent Party. So when someone says someone's running as an independent, you have to ask the question, are they really part of the Independent Party, or are they running as unaffiliated, okay? There's the Libertarian Party, there's the Pacific Green Party, the Progressive Party, and the Working Families Party. And of course, the largest single voting bloc in our state is the non-affiliated voter. They are not affiliated with any political party. That's the largest segment in almost every county, but it's the largest segment in the state. And as we go down the road here a ways, not today, but as we get down the road, we'll talk more about how that come to pass, okay? So the foundation of the political system in Oregon and in most of the country is based on the voting precincts at the county level. How many of you remember going to actually vote in person where you had to sign your name, okay? The people behind the table there that had the big book that you signed on, those were precinct committee persons, okay? They headed up or were part of the local precinct, okay? So the county is divided into voting precincts based on some formulas and some common sense. They try not to have precinct lines cut across taxing district lines, okay? And that may be words that you're not familiar with, but I'll get there in a little bit, okay? It's the responsibility of the county clerk's office to define these precinct boundaries. They try not to have a precinct boundary cut across lines, but that happens sometimes. So in Benton County, okay, I need to make sure we're clear here. I'm going to talk about stuff from 3 counties because we're represented here mostly by 3 counties, Benton, Lynn, and Marion, okay? So I'm going to try to touch base on that. If you're here from Polk, I'm sorry, I didn't put together stuff on Polk, okay? Benton County is divided into 21 voting precincts. Lynn County into 84, and each of those colors is a different precinct. And then Marion into 121 voting precincts. Now, this gets complicated now because you've got these voting precincts and then you've got cities, some of which are divided by wards. Salem, Albany, Lebanon, they're divided by wards. So you'd like to have those ward lines not cross over a precinct, because if it does, and it has in the past, where you get people on 2 sides of a street, they're in Ward 1 on this side and Ward 2 on that side, and they're in the same precinct. Now that creates problems for generating the ballots. On top of that, we have school districts, and they can be divided into zones. I mean, one of my favorites, I call it the Wild West, is Sweet Home School District is 9 voting zones, okay? Well, that comes about when you have a whole bunch of small school districts and you consolidate them into one, and the agreement is you'll give each of these places a vote. So there was 9 school districts in Sweet Home, okay, and so you got 9 zones, and the zones do cut across precinct lines, so it gets really complicated. Then you add on top of that fire districts, and then water control districts, or Benton County has a number of road districts. Now you start stacking these up, and it's easy to understand how your neighbor just across the street may have a ballot that will look different than yours, okay? Because you sit down to compare and go, wait a minute, that's not on my ballot. And that's true, because you're in a different zone here, okay? So in an example, one of the things that just happened is we did a redistricting, and the clerk at Lynn County was able to adjust the precinct boundaries in Albany to match the 3 wards. Previously, they had wards cut right through streets. So have people on one side of the street would be in one ward, on the other side might be in another ward. So they've cleaned that, were able to clean that up because they had to redo everything anyway, okay? Then we have stuff that crosses county lines. Lynn-Benton Community College, one would think that is Lynn and Benton counties, right? Well, mainly it is, but Lynn County also has some Chemeketa County area that pay taxes in Chemeketa County. So there are some precincts in Lynn County that are part of the Chemeketa County. Chemeketa Community College, okay? At the south, Lane Community College has some precincts in Lynn County that pay taxes to Lane Community College, okay? Then the line between Lynn and Marion County gets to be very confusing because we have towns along the Santiam River that are on both sides of the county. For instance, Mill City. If you're in Mill City, if you go to a restaurant that's up on the highway, you're in Marion County. You go across the bridge, okay, and now you're in Lynn County. So you've got both counties involved. People on the one side of the river, their ballots are going to go to Marion County. On the other side, go to Lynn County. And one of the things that happens, people will turn their ballots into the wrong county. So down towards the end of the election, right after the election is over, you'll see couriers running between counties, moving ballots, okay? And some people go, oh, there's danger here. Well, typically, I only know a lot about Lynn County. Those ballots, when they're moved, are done only by a person who works in the clerk's office, and they typically are accompanied by a deputy, okay? So they're pretty clear about what they need to do there. But you can see that it complicates life when we're trying to figure out my ballot and I'm trying to compare it with my friends and family. And then we've got two school districts that are primarily in Marion County that also and partially in Lynn County, Santiam Canyon and North Santiam, okay? Both of those cross county lines. So this is the piece I mentioned earlier. This one's always puzzled me. The ORS 248 defines how political parties are organized in Oregon. I always thought that odd that we have a state law telling political parties how they ought to be organized, but life's like that. So there are major and minor parties, okay? If you're a registered voter, okay, and you're not one of the unaffiliated, if you've selected a party, then at the county level, unofficially, all the voters that are registered to that party are members of the party. Officially, however, elected or appointed people we call precinct committee persons, they are the official members of the party, okay? And if those words are new to you, just hang on, because I'm going to get there, okay? The precinct committee persons are the individuals in a county that can help set party direction. These are individuals that are elected by members of the party that live within their precinct. To be a precinct committee person, okay, you have to get elected. And the state of Oregon allocates one precinct committee person in a voting precinct for about every 250 population in the precinct. The election is in May every 2 years. So if you're elected PCP, your term is 2 years, and then you have to run again. But it's a big deal to get elected. It requires 3 votes, right? This is the foundation of the political system in most of America, but primarily in Oregon, okay? So individuals who are elected or appointed precinct committee persons, PCPs, are supposed to influence the direction and focus of their local political party at the county level. That's their function. They help to identify and support individuals to run for public office in their county. Their focus is at the county level. They can do stuff at the state and at the federal level, but the primary responsibility and focus is at the county level. They're supposed to be the communication link or conduit between activities of the government, local government, state and federal, at all levels to their friends and neighbors. So the primary responsibility of a precinct committee person is to be informed, find out what's going on with the government, and then share that information with their friends and neighbors. They're not required to go do any more than that. That's the primary bottom line piece. You can choose to be very active as a PCP, okay? Or you can focus on individual areas, such as education, child care, health care, Second Amendment, etc. How many people in here are elected PCPs? Okay, it's pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a short story here. Okay, when Judy and I we retired and we got the house built and we're going, all right, we ought to do something. Okay, here besides sit around. And my mother's words were in my ear. She said, if you want to impact politics, it starts at the precinct level. And I went, I don't know what that is. So I went to the courthouse and talked to Derek Sterling, and he explained the process to me. And at this point, the ballots had already come out, and I said, I wonder how to do this. And he said, well, there are lots of open positions in your precinct where nobody has filed. So one of the things you can do is get a write-in, okay? So put your name on a little 3x5 card of some kind, hand them out to some friends and neighbors and get people to vote for you. And I think Judy got 5 votes and I got 4, okay? And so then we said we got to find out where the meeting's at, and we did that, and out of that became more and more involved, and then we ran again, and names on the ballot, and actually got elected, in a regular way, okay? So it is the foundation piece. When people say, I'd like to be involved in what's going on with politics, where do I start? Start at the precinct level, okay? Now, can I become a precinct committee person other than elected? Yeah. All the counties have a way in which you can become appointed, and it's usually really complicated. You have to fill out a one-page form, okay? And then usually it comes up at the next meeting and they vote on you, okay? It's really, really pretty easy, okay? Hopefully out of the group of PCPs is where we find people to run for office, okay? So here's the deal. The election is in the spring of the even-numbered years. Just had one this last spring. You have to be a member of a political party for 180 days and live in your precinct for 251 days. You fill out a one-page form. You file at the courthouse. There's no fee, okay? And then it shows up on the ballot, and people vote for you. Parties try to make sure that we do not have people competing with one another on that ballot. So, for instance, the precinct I'm in has 10 positions in it. So if we had, let's say there were 12 people who wanted to file, and I'm the person at the county level that they're bringing the information to, I'm going to suggest to this person that they file for an adjacent precinct, which is legal to do. Okay, so you can file to be a precinct committee person in any precinct in your county as long as it's within the same congressional district boundaries, okay? Now, if you've not done that, that sounds like more stuff, but we'll get there, okay? All right, so here's where we're at today. In Benton County, remember I said there are 21 voting precincts. There are 242 possible positions that each party can fill. The Republicans at the election filled 46 of those. That's 19%. The Democrats filled 39%, or 94 positions. Still not much. Lynn County, there are 411 positions. We filled 107 of those. The Democrats filled 50. Here in Marion County, there are 935 PCP positions. 221 were filled by Republicans. The Democrats filled 176. Each party is allocated the 935, okay? So here was my conclusion. Well, I'm not there. I got to do the terms. I'm sorry. Got my mind ahead of my mouth here, okay? Or maybe my mouth ahead of my mind. So here, if you get involved, here are terms that you'll run across, okay? Central Committee. I never was fond of that. It always seemed like a communist term, okay? But it is the group of precinct committee persons that meet on a monthly basis, okay? PCP, that's the precinct committee person we just talked about. You'll hear people talk about the XCOM. That's the executive committee that's elected officers at the county level. Then there are things called delegates. These are all people who are elected at the county level to represent the county at the state level. And then there's a group called the County Republican Women, okay? And there's one in I think 32 of the 36 counties. This is a group of ladies who are part of the Federated Chapter of Republican Women. Their primary focus is on conservative values and providing education. They're restricted in how much involvement they can have in the actual election. Then you'll hear people talk about CD4, CD5. Those are congressional districts. Congressional District 5 is primarily up here. It's Marion and Lynn and portions of Clackamas and Deschutes County. Congressional District 4, okay, that's Lincoln, Benton, Lane, Coos, Curry, and a major part of Douglas County, okay? That's DeFazio's old district. Then you'll hear the GOP, Grand Old Party, refers to the Republicans. The ORP is the Oregon Republican Party. And the RNC is the Republican National Committee. Time requirements to do this job. Most counties have a meeting that lasts once a month, lasts about 2 hours. Okay? If you can't do anything else, you can always go to, and you can go to a meeting, if you're a registered Republican, you can go to any of these Central Committee meetings. You're a registered Democrat, you can go to their meetings, okay? There's typically no restrictions, okay? So here was my bottom line. I said, think of the impact we could have on the political process in our area. I'm talking about Lynn, Benton, and Marion counties. If 1,588 Christians were locking arms and walking together and setting the political priorities based upon Christian principles, that is a biblical worldview. Think about the impact that could have, okay? We just saw what low percentage of the positions are actually filled. Okay, so we're going to switch horses and start talking about elections now, okay? So if you're following along in the catalog, in the textbook or book, whatever you want to call it, we're on page 64. And by the way, that book is available to be able to download it at the church's website. If you go to Sermons, Archives, okay, go down right at the top of the archives, you'll find these lessons there as video. The worksheets will be there, and the answers to the worksheets will be there. So if you miss filling out one of the slots, okay, you can download one where everything's already filled in. And the book is, I think, 129 pages, and it's a PDF file. You can download it, put it on your iPad, okay? Or you know, if you've got a printer with lots of paper, you can print them, okay? So this particular section, we want to talk about the representatives of the people at the federal level, the representatives of the state at the federal level, and the number and location of congressional districts in Oregon, the term of office for the House of Representatives, and the term of office for U.S. senators. Right. If you want to take a look, and I know I set on the cart a pocket copy of the U.S. Constitution. If you want to look when you get home about what it has to say about Congress, it's the legislative branch. It's Article 1. It's the largest part of the U.S. Constitution. It's Article 1. It's 2,242 pages. If you really want to dig in the Federalist Papers, separation of powers is dealt with in papers 47 through 51. The House of Representatives is in 52 through 61, and the Senate in 62 through 66. So if you get this book, okay, you'll find that you're going to read about a third of it talking about this group. And one of the comments that I heard on a Del Tackett tape where he's talking about speaking to a professor friend of his that teaches law, and the law professor has his students read this. And one of the students, or more than maybe one, came in and said, "Oh man, that's really tough to read. That's hard to understand." And the professor said, "Yeah, I know. It was written by a group of gentlemen for the farmers that lived in New York at the time, and maybe someday your educational level will raise up to where theirs was at, okay? Because remember, at that period of time, people were going to college at age 14, okay? So it is hard to read, okay? And part of the difficulty is the language. I mean, it's words that we're not used to, but the content is just marvelous. I mean, the clarity is unbelievable here. So to be a member of the House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years old, be a U.S. citizen for 7 years, live in the state, and the term of office is 2 years. And this is important. Every 2 years, every member of the House of Representatives of the U.S. goes up for election. Same at our state. Every 2 years, every one of the 60 state House members goes up for election. So if we want to change out folks, you can do it every 2 years, okay? So theoretically, initially here it was one House representative for every 30,000 population. Now our founders had no concept about how big the country would get. They knew it would grow, but they just, they couldn't fathom the size. So in 1911, the number was capped at 435, okay? There only can be 435 members of the House. This is called the People's House, okay? And the number of positions you get in each state is based upon population, and we do a census every 10 years. So the definition of the borders of a congressional district is taken care of by the state. The state gets to do that, not the federal government, okay? The House of Representatives is responsible for originating all revenue-raising bills. That's in Section 7 of the Constitution. Initially, they were responsible for the budget. But over a period of time, they got lazy, and they turned the budget process over to the president. So now rather than the People's House doing the job they were elected to do, they've gone, well, no, let the president do that. And if you're watching the process, we haven't had a budget that's been passed through the House in a number of years. They do these continuing resolutions. I look back, but I can't remember the number, but it goes back more than 10 years since we've actually had a budget that they produced that was passed, okay? It's always the continuing resolution. So that's too small for you to read, but ORS 188.010 describes the process in this state that they were to use to organize these congressional districts. And it's stuff like they got to be contiguous, they have to be about equal in population, they have to utilize existing geographic or political boundaries, they can't divide communities of common interest, they have to have some kind of transportation system for them. And it also says no district shall be drawn for the purpose of favoring any political party, incumbent, legislature, or other person. Well, that's a figment of imagination there. I mean, they do that anyway. Okay? So here's the current situation in Oregon. There are 6 congressional districts. The one with the question mark is the new congressional district, and in creating it, they had to rearrange all the lines. So for instance, Lynn County used to be in Peter DeFazio's congressional district, CD4. It's not. It's now over here in Kurt's district, okay? So there are 6 districts. Our area that we're dealing with here are districts 4, 5, and 6. 4 includes Benton County. 5 is Lynn, Marion, and a little piece of Benton, and Clackamas, and a chunk of Deschutes. This map, I think, is a little cleaner about that process. You can see this is our group here, okay? That's CD5. CD4, I cut it off because it goes clear down at the bottom of the state. And then 6 is this little chunk here where Salem gets cut off from 5 and is over in 6. So those of you in Benton County, you need to elect a House member, and you get to select out of these two. Neither one are incumbents. Now, Val had another position before this, but she's not an incumbent of CD4, okay? So these are your two, okay? Lynn and Marion, we get to look at both of these. We've got Lori and Jamie we have to decide on, okay? Marion, you have this complication in Marion where you also have, CD6 includes portions of Polk and Yamhill County. So again, you've got these two to have to decide on. And no one in here will get to vote for two, okay? You only get to vote for one. If you're in Marion County, it'll either be 6 or it'll be 5, okay? Depending on the boundaries. So if you live close to Salem, you're going to be in this congressional district. If you live out in the majority of the county, it's going to be here. And this gets to be kind of puzzling because, for instance, a person could win in one county and lose in another county, and it could shift things dramatically. Okay? I have acquaintances who have run in positions where they were in both Lynn and Marion counties, and they won in Lynn and lost in Marion, and they lost by a large enough number in Marion that they lost the race. Okay? So these, it's hard to figure out who won on the last day. And later on, I'll tell you why that gets more complicated, because we won't know until a week after who wins, okay? So if you want to try to figure out which of these people you ought to vote for, go back to the list that's on the front page of the handout, okay? And it gives you sources where to go get information. Because my task here is not to tell you who to vote for, but to give you information on how you can be informed. Okay? At this stage of the game, we all have to put in the effort to bring ourselves up to speed. Okay? At the Senate, these are 6-year terms now. Okay? About a third of the Senate comes up every 2 years on the ballot. Okay? Remember in 1913, we changed this from the state identifying them to a popular vote. These are the two people who are representing the state of Oregon in the U.S. Senate today. We all get to vote on this, have this decision. Ron in there or Joe Ray, okay? And that will be on all of our ballots because these are statewide positions. So in summary, our state is represented by 8 elected individuals.